Hello BookTube, I'm Heather and this is Recently Seen Reading. I thought I would take advantage of the miracle that is electricity, even though it's storming out, to do a first update on how my no borrow month is going. I do a no borrow, a daft idea, I admit it, every 2 or 3 months to try to keep myself in line. Otherwise, the borrowed books just accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and I don't read them, and I don't necessarily read the books that I own. I tend on the whole to be more likely to read the books that I've borrowed as long as they're not, 4 or 5 month loans, which I can get from the university libraries. So what have I read so far 4 days in? These, for the most part, are books that I had started in March and have just finished up over the last 4 days. The first was the audiobook of Wolffall. This was narrated by Simon Vance and is, of course, Hilary Mantel's masterpiece. I've read Wolffall 3 times, so this might be my 4th time through it. And I'm not normally or usually an audiobook user, but I wanted a companion for walking in the spring and a companion while I'm doing stuff around the apartment. And it's quite a lovely experience to listen to Mantel be read. I'm not always entranced by the changing of the voices as the narrator shifts from the he that is Thomas Cromwell to the he that is someone else in the room with Cromwell. But it's a kind of a clarifying moment each of the times that happens, that you can tell more clearly perhaps than you can from what's on the page who the he is in any part of the novel. And that's one of the difficulties I think first-time readers of Wolffall have, is the initial 20 or 30 pages getting a sense of when he is Thomas Cromwell, the actual narrator of the novel, and when he is any number of other characters. And there's such a pleasure in listening to someone just slowly read the descriptions. It's made me be able to hear some of the patterns in the descriptive language that I probably didn't attend to quite so closely when I read it in print. It would have helped that I was walking and that was the only thing that I was thinking about was the story at the time. So that was a success in the first book I finished as part of the No Borrow. Let me see. Next I finished 2 novels, one which I thought was a disappointment and one which I thought was surprisingly good. I don't usually like to talk about the disappointments because, who wants to hear bad news about books, especially if it's a book that other people quite like. So the disappointment anyways for me was Tommy Orange's Wandering Stars, or The Wandering Stars. This just came out and it's the follow-up to There, which I realized was actually 4 years ago. I've been telling myself, oh, that came out like 2 years ago or a year ago. No, 4 years. 3.5 years. I quite liked There. I liked the fragmented narrative. I liked the way it told bits and pieces of a complex family structure's story in fragments, and it still maintained a kind of propulsive forward movement. I was looking forward to more of that in Wandering Stars, but I didn't get along quite so well with it. I don't think it's as good a book as There. And I've been stewing on it, because why didn't this work for me? I understand what Tommy Orange, I think, is trying to do. I mean, it's the sequel to There, so it tells what happens to the Red Feather family after the shooting in There. Yes, that's a spoiler. And it also provides, I suppose, what you might call deep backstory. It traces the history of the family from the 1860s up to the present moment. And I understand why Orange would want to do that, because he's interested in what are the origins of addiction and addiction patterns that run in families. Where do they come from? Why does this happen? And that's a big topic, and it's a compelling topic, especially in communities that have had difficult struggles with addiction. And so Orange roots this in, I think, his characters' family's experience with the outcome of the Indian Wars, and more specifically, their experiences in the US version of residential schools. I think they're called industrial schools mostly. And that's fair enough. That's an argument about generational trauma that has been made before, and it's a worthy topic to explore in fiction. But I found this in this particular novel, it came across, especially in the first 60 pages of the novel, as didactic. And I think that comes from dedicating that first 30 to 60 pages to explaining, what the Sand Creek Massacre was, what the displacement of some of the people who survived those massacres to Florida and then back to the Midwest, and their education in Indian schools or residential schools. I found that whole section seemed overly didactic in a way that I don't think was necessary or shouldn't have been necessary. It seemed to me as a little bit of not trusting the reader, and there are complex reasons why someone might not trust their reader, but I think that's why it didn't work for me. I thought a lot of the energy of the book and of the stories that it was trying to tell dissipated as a result of that, and I couldn't get past, as a reader, that sense that there's a big chunk of didacticism at the beginning that I wasn't expecting. So that was a disappointment for me. I would, however, try him again. If he writes a third novel, I'd be willing absolutely to have a go at it. The second novel, which I thought was much more successful, is this one, The Clarion by Nina Dunic. This came out last year. It's a Canadian novel. It was nominated to, longlisted for the Giller Prize. And I was surprised by this. I wasn't expecting a lot from it because I've had, uneven luck with some of the Giller nominees in the past. And this cover didn't inspire a lot of confidence for me. This was published by a very tiny publishing company here in Canada, Invisible Publishing. I think it's called Publishing or Press. And it's the story of Stasia, who is approaching 40, and Peter, who I think is in his mid-30s. They're siblings living in Toronto in the contemporary time. And it's a very, very introspective novel. The chapters or the sections alternate from Peter's point of view to Stasia's point of view, and they meet at one point for a meal, 2/3 of the way through the novel. But other than that, it's separate narration all the way through. And you get to see Peter's concerns and what he's interested in. He's works for a living as a prep cook and a pastry cook for a small restaurant, and on the side works as a professional musician. And his sister Stasia has worked her way up from the very bottom of a fashion company into a managerial position, upper manager in the same company. And it talks about, in a way that I didn't expect, Dunic is showing the various ways these siblings escape both from the frustrations in their present and their frustrations in their past, and how they deal with some very basic unhappinesses and disappointments. It's quite clever in some ways, and the language is very clean and crisp, and there's nothing didactic in it, really. Parts of it I think are probably a little overdone, but it surprised me at how effective it was as a novel about work, the kinds of work, and the difference between work and vocation, which is not a theme that is explicit on the surface, but once you clue into it, it's there. So that was a successful read for me. It's a short thing. It's 200-ish pages, and this, I think, was actually a stronger novel than Wandering Stars, which was a surprise, because that's not what I expected the outcome of the reading to be. So those are the first three novels. I also just finished today, and I'm not sure what I think of it, Michael Ondaatje's latest collection of poem. I think it's called, I've Lost the Title. I'll put the title down below. It's very Michael Ondaatje-esque. Very introspective, very elusive, lots and lots of references to art and poetry in particular, And as always, within the first 5 pages of one of his texts, there's a dog. You go and you look, if you're an Ondaatje fan, you look in every single novel and every poetry collection I've read, there's always one or more dogs present. It's a thing. There's always a dog. Sometimes a cat, but almost always a dog. And I'm not sure whether this is a particularly strong collection of poetry. I'm going to have to read it a second time. So that's 4 so far. So that's four borrowed books. I don't think I've gotten through one that I own yet. I've got probably 2 or 3 others on the go. I've got a collection by David Sutherland, a historian. He died recently from, it's a Champlain Society collection of essentially administrative documents associated with the Halifax explosion, which happened in 1917 and destroyed a quarter of the city and killed 2,000 people in a heartbeat and blinded thousands of people. And it's quite engaging. I'm kind of dipping into that. And it's sat on my shelf waiting for me to pick it up and read it for months. And that's one of the key advantages of these no borrow months for me. Not only do I get through the library books I've borrowed faster, I pick up ones that I've been resisting reading. And I also start to find my own books interesting again. And that's one of the reasons why I do these ridiculous, foolish, daft no borrow months. I hope you have had a good week, and that if you're dealing with a storm that's running through the northeast of the continent, that you're warm and dry and that your electricity is working. Electricity is a blessing. Don't take it for granted. Bye-bye.